Imagine being abandoned with 4 young children, the oldest only 8 years old, the youngest still in your arms. Imagine having to explain to these children why their dad will never come home again. And now imagine that years later, the same man who left shows up at your door, not to ask for forgiveness, but to ask for something even harder to give. This is the true story of Grace, a woman who taught us that there is something more powerful than resentment, unconditional love. A story that will move you, because sometimes life puts us in front of choices that define who we truly are.
It was an ordinary Thursday in March. Grace was preparing breakfast while her 4 children got ready for school. John, her husband, had seemed distant for weeks. They had been together for 12 years, building a family, dreams, plans. But that morning, John packed his bags. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a moment of anger. It was a cold, calculated decision. "I've met someone," he said, without even looking into his wife's eyes. "I can't live like this anymore." Grace felt the ground crumble beneath her feet, not because of the 12 years of marriage, but seeing her 4 young children running to their father, not understanding that he was leaving forever. Lucas, her 8-year-old, asked, "Daddy, will you be here when I get back from school?" John simply kissed the boy on the forehead and walked out the door. That silence that filled the house, that emptiness, Grace still remembers it as if it were yesterday. The first few months were the hardest. Grace worked as a secretary, her salary barely covering the rent. There were nights when she divided the last pack of pasta into 5 small plates, pretending she wasn't hungry so her children could eat a little more. There were early mornings when she cried in the bathroom, hand over her mouth so the children wouldn't hear. But every morning she got up, laid out each child's uniform, made breakfast with whatever she had, and said, "Come on, my loves, today is going to be a good day." Lucas, the oldest, began waking up earlier to help with the younger siblings. Anna, 6 years old, shared her snack with her little sister. They became a team, a family even closer because of their pain. Grace took 2 evening courses, got a promotion, then another. In 5 years, she had bought a small house, but it was theirs. Her children saw their mother's strength every day. She never spoke ill of their father, only saying, "Daddy's following his path, and we are following ours." John, on the other hand, seemed to have found the happiness he was looking for. Carla was younger, with no children, no responsibilities. They traveled, went out, lived a life he thought he deserved. But time has a cruel way of revealing the truth. Carla didn't want a serious commitment, didn't want to hear about the children he had forgotten. When John tried to talk about Lucas, Anna, Pedro, and little Sophia, she would change the subject. Gradually, he realized he was living an empty life. Carla distanced herself when he lost his job. She pulled away even more when he began to feel the first pains in his back, the first signs that something wasn't right. John found himself alone in an apartment that didn't even feel like his, looking at old photos of his children on his phone, wondering what he had done with his life. At first, John thought it was just fatigue. Then came the headaches, the swelling in his legs, the shortness of breath. The doctor was straightforward. Chronic kidney failure. His kidneys were failing. "You're going to need hemodialysis," the doctor explained, "and eventually a transplant." John felt the world spin. He was 45, thinking he had his whole life ahead of him. The hemodialysis sessions were 3 times a week 4 hours each. John sat there, connected to that machine, watching his life being filtered, drop by drop. Carla showed up less and less. At first, there were excuses. Then she simply stopped coming. "I can't handle this," she said in a cold phone call. "You have to understand, John, I still have a life to live." And there he was, the man who had abandoned a family to chase happiness, completely alone. No wife, no children, no one. Just him and that machine keeping him alive.
It was on a Saturday morning that John appeared at Grace's door. She barely recognized him. Thin, pale, aged. The children were playing in the yard when they heard the doorbell. "Grace." His voice was weak. "I know I have no right. I know that—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Grace felt her chest tighten, not with compassion, with anger. All the pain of those years came rushing back at once. "What are you doing here, John?" "I'm sick," he said. "I need a kidney. And you—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "The doctor said you would be a match. You and the boys." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace looked at the man who had once been her husband, who had once been the father of her children, and who now stood there, desperate, begging for his life. "You have the courage—" She began to speak, but stopped. The children had stopped playing and were watching from the window. Lucas, now 15, had recognized his father.
Tom excitedly almost whispered, "Grace went 3 days without sleep, not because of the decision itself, but because of the weight of what it meant. She spoke with her children, one by one. Lucas said, 'Mom, I understand if you don't want to.' Anna, now a teenager, cried, 'He doesn't deserve it, Mom!' But Grace looked at Sophia, who barely remembered her father, and realized something. This wasn't a decision about John. It was a decision about who she was, about the values she wanted to teach her children. 'I'm going to donate,' she announced. 'Not for him, for you, so you know that love isn't about deserving. Love is about choosing to rise above the pain.' The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday. The night before, John called. He was crying. 'Grace, I don't even know how—' 'Don't say anything,' she interrupted. 'Just promise me one thing. Be a better man. If not for me, then for your children. They deserve to know a real father.' The operation lasted 6 hours. Grace woke up with her 4 children by her side, holding her hands. 'We did it, Mom,' Lucas whispered. 'The doctor said everything went perfectly.' Today, 2 years later, John is a different man. He hasn't returned to the family. Some bridges were burned forever. But he is present in his children's lives. He pays child support on time, attends graduations, remembers birthdays. Grace? Grace discovered something about herself that day, that she was capable of a love that goes beyond resentment, beyond justice, beyond what is right or wrong. 'I didn't do this for him,' she told me when we spoke. 'I did it for me, because I realized that carrying hatred is like carrying a stone in your heart, and I chose to be free.' Grace's true victory wasn't saving John's life. It was saving her own soul from resentment. Because sometimes the greatest courage isn't in demanding justice, but in choosing the path of love. And you? What would you choose? If you liked this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the bell to receive more real moving stories like this one.